Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in.
Welcome into another episode of the podcast, everybody. I am excited to be here with you again this week talking about resistance. And if you listened to my episode a few weeks ago, you heard me talk about the cycle of growth and sort of the ups and downs of really working on something and transforming ourselves and all of those things. Today, I'm going to get more narrowed in. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I actually encourage you to go back to and listen to it because it really does sort of kind of give you a little bit of an orientation. So you know, that episode, which was called Inhale, Exhale, the Rhythm of Life, I talked about the four phases of the cycle of growth. That first phase of the cycle of growth is inception. It's when we get super excited and pumped up about something new. We can't wait to get started. You know, we're so pumped up about like this new thing that we're going to be or have or become or whatever. And then the second stage on the cycle of growth is deception. That's when we are sort of realizing, like, wait, hey, hang on a second. This is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And we almost feel like deceived, which is kind of funny because I guess maybe we deceived ourselves into thinking this might be easy or something like that. Or sometimes when you're working with a coach or, you know, you've invested in like maybe like a self-paced course or something like that. And you're like, what? This salesperson told me this was going to be easy, you know, so you feel deceived by even the thing that you've undertaken. And then the third stage is called transformation. It's this like stage where it's like, okay, you're finally getting your footing, but you still have to be really intentional. It's not easy, but it's also not like feeling like a gut punch anymore. It's just like it's a thing that you've been working at and you're starting to see results but it still takes work. And then the last stage is called identity. It is when you get to the other side of all of that hard stuff and you truly have become this thing that you were super excited about becoming, where back when you were feeling that inception enthusiasm and stuff like that. Or sometimes I say, you know, you're no longer doing this thing, you are this thing. You know, you're no longer just doing these great parenting skills. You have become this great parent that you envisioned yourself to be. So those two middle stages, deception and transformation, those are real like resistance phases. They're a phase where you might notice yourself like slipping back into old habits or just feeling like you want to give up and stuff like that. And I will tell you, I mean, in terms of confessions, so many situations in my life. I think all of us have been in situations where we could see ourselves in this for sure. The one that I thought of for today is when I started running. So I never ran, like I'm telling you right now, like even in gym class in school, like I don't think I ever ran 1 mile in my life growing up or as a young adult or anything like that. After my second kid was born, my dear friend, who I promise you is the only person on the planet who could have, you know, gotten me to agree to this at the time, she was like, you know, she had just had a baby too. And so she was like, let's sign up for this Title IX 9K on Mother's Day, you know, blah, blah, blah. So my kiddo was born in November. Mother's Day is in May. So she was like, we're going to do this thing. And I was like, I can't run. Like I've never run in my life. Um, but in Colorado, Title IX, the, the store, Title IX sponsors a 9 kilometer run around Boulder Reservoir every Mother's Day. And it's all about moms and women. And, you know, if you know anything about Title IX, it's this law that means that women should be getting equanimity in terms of like access to um, uh, sports and athletics, but it goes beyond athletics, but I'm not going to get into that anymore. But suffice it to say, my friend Kathy convinced me to say, okay, fine, I'm going to run a 9 kilometer mile with you, even though or a race with you, even though I've never run 1 kilometer. And then she had this training program that was literally called like From Couch to 10K or something like that. You can Google it, it still exists. And it's a great thing. Where we had to like run. So like we would go for 20, I think if I remember correctly, it was like we would go for 20 minutes. And in the first week, you ran for, I think it was like one of those minutes, and then you walked for the other 19. And then the next week, maybe it was like you ran for 5 minutes and walked for 15 or whatever. And you just kept like adding time that you were running and less shortening the time that you were walking and stuff like that until you were able to run for like an hour or something like that, which is essentially how long it took me to run. I think in the end, when I ran that race, I ran an 11-minute mile, which is whatever. It's fine. My goal for that myself for that race was to just run without stopping running, without having to walk at some point during the race. But this is such a great example of resistance because I agreed to it because I was super excited, first of all, about having a thing to do with my friend because we use the Enneagram. I am a sexual one, which means that my most delicious thing that happens in my life is deep, connected relationships with people. And so having a friend who asks me to do something with them is like the most blessed thing that could ever be. And even more exciting if it's just the two of us. And so Kathy probably could have asked me to like dig a hole to China with her, and I'd been like, we're in it together, Kathy. Let's do it. So I was super excited about having a thing to do with my bestie. I also was really excited about getting back into shape. I'm going to be honest, and I've talked in other podcasts about all of my body issues and stuff like that. But if I'm honest, one of the things I was really excited about was fitting back into my jeans and looking a little bit closer to like what I had looked like before I had kids and all of that stuff. Um and I was super excited about doing a thing that I never done before and all that stuff. So that was my inception phase. And then I mean, deception happened real quick. I mean, thank God for this training program because, the first couple of weeks I was like, oh, I can do this. Okay, okay, this isn't so bad. But eventually I was like, okay, this really stinks. In the beginning, the phases where I was running were so short that I didn't even have time to be like, this sucks before I stopped running. Um, but once you get to more like 15 minutes of running or something like that, like 15 minutes is plenty of time for you to think about how much you suck and how much time is left and can we be done yet and all of the stuff. So that it's a really great example of my resistance phase. And I would say that that's kind of the deception piece where I was realizing like this really sucks. And by the way, 15 minutes is ain't nothing because when I'm actually on the day of the race, I'm going to be running for like an hour. And, it probably wasn't actually a whole hour, but in my mind, I was like, I'm the slowest person on the planet. I've never run in my life. So I'm probably going to take an hour to do this race. And, um, you know, I was really confronting how much this stunk and like how far I had to go and how bad I was at it and everything and like how out of shape I was because I was super sore, like all of that stuff. And then, eventually I got to the place where I was like able to run for like 25, 30 minutes or whatever. And I started to like it. And I started to like how I felt. I was starting to see some results. Like I was seeing results in my like stamina, but also some of my clothes were starting to fit me properly again and all of that stuff. So I was starting to see results, but I still had to stick to that program. I absolutely would not go around telling people I'm a runner. That's for sure. I might run, but that doesn't mean I'm a runner. And had to stay in that transformation phase for a long time. And it wasn't, I don't think it was till like after the race where I realized like, oh wait, the race is over, but I'm still running. I guess I'm a runner now. Like I guess I really like running. Like this is now no longer just I do this thing, I am this thing. I don't just go running, I am a runner. And I did get there. But that resistance phase is what I want to talk about today, because I want you to start to be able to identify when you're in that resistance phase and when your kid is in a resistance phase. And I want you not only to be able to recognize that, but celebrate that, because resistance is everything. So let's talk about that a little bit. Um, you know, our mind evolved in a time when life was constantly in danger, and trying something new instead of, using what was already working for us is dangerous. So our minds really try to protect us by worrying and stopping us from taking risks and all of that stuff. And if you're really following this stuff, tune into the episode that's going to come in a couple of weeks. It's going to be called Leap Before You Look, where I talk even more about the thinking center of intelligence that we have and everything. But suffice it to say, for right now, the mind hates change. Your brain wants you to stay where you're at because it's already proven that no matter how bad it is, it's working for you on some level. You're not dying. You're surviving, and your brain is good enough is good enough for your brain. Okay. So let's not be taking risks. Let's not be trying to change things. But the truth is that unfortunately, we have to take risks if we want to improve our circumstances. We're not going to have a different reality by doing the same thing. We change has to happen. And that means that we have to push through that part where our minds try to stop us. So when I see resistance in my kids or in myself or in my clients, I know that pushing through is I'm witnessing that right now. And it ain't pretty. Imagine if you were my husband while I was doing this running thing. Stinky Kathy, God damn it. Why'd she talk me into this? This sucks. Blah, blah, blah. My back hurts. I hate this. And then also like getting frustrated because it's like, oh shit, I was supposed to run and I didn't run today. I've got to go right now. Will you make dinner instead? I mean, nonsense, right? Because I'm in this resistance phase or making up excuses not to go or whatever. And there's so many different ways that resistance looks. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how does resistance look in grown-ups, and then also what does it look like in children. So, you know, this the list that I give my clients a lot about like signs that they're in a resistance phase. I even kind of jokingly talk about it. They might feel that way towards me, but some of the things are like making excuses why you're not doing your work, avoiding your work, deciding the work doesn't apply to your circumstances. Oh my gosh, I wish I could tell you how many times I've heard from people like, yeah, I just don't really like talking about my feelings. That's just not my style. Or, I know that some people get hung up on this or that, but that's not my deal right now. And as a coach, I'm sitting there going, okay, cool. So you don't want to change is basically what's happening. Or an example from me in this running thing is like, I don't really need to run today. It's fine. I'll do it tomorrow. Or I don't really need to do it this incremental way. I'm sure I'll be fine on race day. Yeah, right. you know Getting complacent, which is another great example of like, things are going fine. So this, I see this a lot with my clients where they do create amazing results with their kids, and then we get comfortable, and so we're not really doing the stuff in the workbook, or we're not really filling out the pre-session assessment before we meet or whatever. And pretty soon I have a session with them where it's like, okay, everything's off the rails again. And it's like, yeah, we sort of like stopped doing that work. Or an example that I think is resonant for a lot of people is like, let's say you decide to start, up leveling your nutrition, and you want to have like a healthier nutrition program or something like that. And then you start to see the results you wanted. Like you have more energy, you don't need as much sleep at night. Maybe, you feel more fit. You can tell that you're stronger. Maybe your back pain goes away, all these great things. And then you're like, okay, awesome. It's working. And what do? You go out that weekend and you have like a giant piece of chocolate cake and have 3 drinks instead of 1 or whatever. This is that like cognitive dissonance, or, that sort of like irrationality where it's like, oh, okay, all the things that I used to get here, I don't have to keep doing those because now I'm here. That's not what works. So that's that complacency that we can have. Slipping back into old patterns that you didn't want to do, or they don't serve you, but you find yourself doing these old habits, right? Um even if you can't identify what's going on inside of you, you might be able to tell that you're in a resistance mode because you start to see improved results followed by worse results. That's a really great sign that maybe it's time to get reflective and, see like, well, why would that be? And look at what's kind of going into that situation. And this is where I kind of jokingly say to my clients, like, if you're feeling frustration with your coach, you're probably in a resistance phase, because part of what a coach is supposed to do is kind of confront you with the stuff that you might be avoiding so that you actually don't avoid it anymore. And so that can be really frustrating. It'd be really annoying to hear me say to you more than once, well, why might that be happening? Or, how did you create that frustrating situation for yourself? Ugh, yikes. I do not like that question. I feel yucky even just hearing it, but sometimes that's what we need to do. Now, a good coach doesn't just, punch you in the face with your unfinished business and make you want to cry every time in the corner and protect yourself from your coach. We never want you to feel that way. It's our job to, just like it's a parent's job to bring control and boundaries and leadership to parenting with love and compassion. It is also a coach's job to bring that accountability and hold your feet to the fire in a way that still feels loving and spacious and emotionally safe for you. So if you're working with a coach who it doesn't feel like that with, that's something to maybe address, right? Um, and then I think another great sign of, I don't say great sign, but a common sign of resistance is, really telling yourself pretty terrible stories about yourself, your abilities, thinking you can't do it. You're the only one for whom whatever it is isn't going to work, or that's not possible. There's something wrong with you, etc. And the last thing I'm going to put in here, and you'll hear me talk more about this in that future podcast episode as well. A sign of resistance can often be thinking yourself in circles, not making decisions, not moving forward, and kind of just getting lost in analysis paralysis. Especially if we're talking about the Enneagram, there are certain Ennea types whose way of avoiding um their way of avoiding like what might happen if they make a decision or do something or move forward or whatever is to sort of almost intentionally confuse themselves with overthinking. So just think about that. Those are all little signs that you might be in a resistance phase. Maybe even you might be in a resistance phase about setting up a consultation with me. I mean, that would make a lot of sense, right? Like, what if when you talk to me, you have to confront stuff that you have been not really wanting to look at with your eyes wide open until now? Or, maybe when you decide to set up your consultation with me, you're going to love it so much that then you're going to be definitely wanting to work with me, and you have to decide if you want to invest money in something like that. Like, there's a lot of reasons why you might be avoiding doing something like that and staying in this resistance phase where you have that inception of like, oh my gosh, it would be so awesome to work with Anne. It would be so awesome to have help in this thing. Oh my gosh, I can imagine the parent that I would be if I did it. Yay, yay, yay. And then right when it comes down time to like click that button and go to the booking link, it's like, no, I can't do it. So that might be your resistance phase. But also think about what your kids' resistance phases look like. Better behavior followed by worse behavior is a really great sign of resistance. And if that's happening to you because you've been implementing some new parenting skills, I actually want to give you a huge round of applause, because that means that your child is going through that learning process, that acquisition of new skill. So what usually happens when you start to hold boundaries with kiddos is, this isn't true for all kids, but there's definitely a hefty number of kids who, when you start holding boundaries with them, they look for all the loopholes that they've never looked for before because they never needed to, because they could get away with things without looking for those loopholes. So like all of a sudden, I'll have sessions with clients where it's like, my kid's behavior has gotten worse. Like now, instead of just throwing a tantrum, they're like throwing things at the walls of their bedroom. Or, now instead of just kicking and screaming, they're name calling me and telling me they hate me or whatever. It's like, they're in a resistance phase, which is an amazing sign. And it makes perfect sense that that would be how their resistance looks, right? Because it's like, okay, well, this thing isn't working for me any longer. So, what I'm going to try to do, because the brain hates change. So, instead of changing my way of being, I'm going to double down on my way of being and see if that works for me. And so, worst behavior from your child, if it is in response to you up leveling your parenting, is often a sign that we are, working towards a breakthrough here, which can be very reassuring to hear from a coach. I would say, just in general, like tantrums, anger, frustration, all of these things, like just think about the word resistance. Like your kid is resisting learning this lesson that your parenting is offering the opportunity to learn. Your child is resisting the limitations that his circumstances have given him. Your child is resisting paying attention to the fact that they are the ones who got themselves into this pickle, not you, right? And the parenting that I teach my clients to do really does teach us how to kind of take ourselves out of the equation so that kids really do have to sit and acknowledge the part that they play in the outcome they've created. Like I'm sitting here in my room with no books in my room because I chose to throw all my books and dent the wall in here, not because my mom is a jerk. But if we get angry and blah, 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 and I'm not going to go down this road because it's a topic for another podcast, but like when we parent in typical ways, our behavior makes it really easy for our kids not to connect the dots between themselves and their situation. It makes it really, really easy for kids to distract themselves from making that connection by being angry with us, blaming us, telling themselves a story about us, and not really looking at themselves at all. So it makes perfect sense for our kids to resist all of these amazing lessons and learning and skill building that it will happen. They will go through those resistance phases. They will go through deception. They will go through transformation and then become this new identity for themselves. That will happen. And the blessing that our kids get that we don't, unfortunately, is that we can hold that container for them so that the option for them to just give up doesn't really exist. Like, how awesome would it be if whatever it is that you're trying to work on, there was some grown up, holding a space for you so that failure is really not an option. You are going to persist through this. I'm going to be with you every step of the way. And we're not going to go backwards and we're not going to give up and we're not going to do any of that. This is happening and there's only one direction, which is forward and towards that new identity that you've conceived for yourself when you undertook this. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in the same way it does when we were kids. And it only exists for kids, even when parents are holding that container with, accountability and consistency and love and compassion and all of those things. But I would say that having a coach is probably the closest thing that an adult can get to that container being held for them. It's still at the end of the day comes down to like, well, what are we willing to undertake? What sometimes I say to my clients, what really determines the outcome of our working together is what happens between our sessions, not during our sessions. Like, what are you going to do with the stuff that has come out of this session today? That's the determinant. Now, I can hold you accountable by bringing it up again next week or by messaging you in our, messenger app in between, or by writing it down as a to-do list for you do the checklist. Like, I remove as many obstacles as I possibly can for you, but at the end of the day, it's still not the same exactly as being a kid. But I would say that if you know that that's what you need in terms of accomplishing something, hiring a coach is the best gift you can give yourself. And that's true not just about parenting. Like, my business never thrived the way it does now before I hired a business coach. That was the best move I ever made. I have clients who've hired like career coaches and financial coaches and things like that. And it's because you have this person whose job it is to like kind of hold you in and hold space for you and walk with you through that resistance phase. So, think about that as well. But I think it's really important to look at like what resistance phase might be what your kid is in right now, and how can you tell that it's a resistance phase and it's actually something to celebrate. because the cycle of growth isn't just one way that people achieve growth. It is the only way. So it's impossible for us to reach our destination without going through this resistance stuff. So what I would love for you to do is start to think about resistance as, something to get excited about. And, like think about like when a baby is learning to walk, you know, a baby learning to walk is super, super wobbly. They fall down so many times, and that's how they learn. But nobody says the baby should give up. They're never going to figure out how to walk. Nobody says that at all. In fact, we do the opposite. We're so excited for this baby. We cheer and we encourage them through all of that resistance stuff, all of that learning. And we never once think that their failures mean that they should quit or that they're anything other than a sign that they're getting closer to their goal. So if we could look at ourselves and our kids who aren't learning to walk but are learning other skills like putting their book bag away at the end of the school day or something like that, if we can look at things through that lens, we understand like, okay, well, we're never going to achieve goals without failures, mistakes, or pain. So when you feel that resistance feeling or you see that resistance in your child, try to celebrate, because that really is a sign that change is happening. You're just seeing it in the midst, like you're witnessing it occurring right before your eyes. And that new you or that new sort of version of your kiddo is really just around the corner, only if you refuse to give up, if you keep and stick with it. So think about, where do you see that for yourself and your child right now? And if it feels like parenting is one area that you want to have that container for yourself and you're ready to kind of go through that resistance with companionship and get to the other side and be the version of parenting or be the parent that you want to be, set up that free consultation with me and tell me about it. Tell me what has stopped you in the past. Tell me what does it look like on that identity side? Like, what is the thing that you want to get excited about and create? And working with a coach is how a lot of that resistance stuff is just growing pains and not what is going to completely derail you. Have a great week, everybody. I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Bye.
The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.